Imagine a war between two nations, sparked by a pig. The year was 1859. The United States and Great Britain stood on the edge of war. Not over gold, not over territory rich in resources, but over the death of a single pig. It sounds absurd. A pig killed in a potato patch nearly triggered an armed conflict between two of the most powerful nations of the 19th century. But behind the comedy lies a story of pride, strategy, and fragile diplomacy, where one wrong move could have turned a ridiculous quarrel into a blood-soaked war. And tonight, I'll take you through it. By the mid-1800s, the Pacific Northwest was still a frontier. The Oregon Treaty of 1846 had set the border between the US and British Canada along the 49th parallel, but there was one problem. The treaty was vague about the waters around the San Juan Islands, a cluster of islands between modern-day Washington State and Vancouver Island. Both nations claimed the islands, both planted settlers there, and both believed the land was theirs. For more than a decade, Americans and Britons lived uneasily side by side, always aware the line between peace and war could be crossed with one spark. That spark arrived on June 15, 1859. Lyman Cutler, an American farmer living on San Juan Island, walked outside that morning to find a pig digging in his garden. Again. It wasn't the first time. The pig, owned by the Hudson's Bay Company, had been raiding his potato patch for weeks. But this time, Cutler snapped. He raised his rifle. One shot, and the pig collapsed. Cutler later admitted, "It was eating my potatoes. I had to shoot it." The British saw it differently. To them, he had killed company property, valued at $100. When they demanded payment, Cutler offered $10. They refused. What should have been a minor quarrel between neighbors became a test of national pride. British officials threatened to arrest Cutler. Local Americans panicked, fearing their farmer would be dragged away by force. They called for military protection. Washington Territory's governor sent Captain George Pickett. Yes, the same Pickett who would later lead the infamous charge at Gettysburg. Pickett landed with 64 U.S. soldiers and declared, "We will not be bullied out of our rights." The British responded. Within weeks, they sent 5 warships carrying 2,000 Marines to anchor off San Juan Island. The United States reinforced its presence with 461 troops and 14 cannons. On that tiny island, the armies of two nations now stood face to face. Imagine the scene. American soldiers digging in with bayonets fixed, British warships looming offshore, cannons trained on the island. One gunshot, just one, could have triggered a war between the US and the British Empire, and all because of a pig. For weeks, tension boiled. Soldiers drilled, officers barked orders. Local settlers held their breath, knowing their farms could become a battlefield at any moment. It was a standoff with no end in sight. But far away, in Washington and London, cooler heads prevailed. Neither side truly wanted war. The United States was still fragile, only 2 years from its own civil war. Britain was overstretched around the world. Negotiators stepped in, urging restraint. Commanders on the ground, like British Rear Admiral Robert Baines, refused to fire first. Baines famously declared, "I will not involve two great nations in a war over the squabbles of 2 men and a pig." Slowly, tempers cooled. The crisis ended with a compromise. Both nations agreed to a joint military occupation of the island. American and British camps sat only miles apart for 12 long years. Finally, in 1872, arbitration by Kaiser Wilhelm I of Germany awarded the San Juan Islands to the United States. The only casualty in the entire affair, one unlucky pig. The Pig War is remembered today as one of history's strangest almost wars, a reminder of how fragile peace can be and how pride can inflate the smallest disputes into global crises. It makes me wonder, how many times has history stood on the brink of chaos, all because of something small, something bizarre, something no one could have predicted? For more untold stories of strange history, stay with us here on Top Rank Wonders.